What's going on, guys? I'm Pete, and welcome to Retro Game Attic. I've made a few episodes before where I go through old video game magazines from my childhood, so for this episode we're going to check out Electronic Gaming Monthly, September 1998. So let's get into it. And here we have Electronic Gaming Monthly, September 1998. Now, I wasn't a subscriber to this magazine. I bought this one. This must be like a newsstand edition, but I've kept it ever since. And I was always impressed with the in-house artists of these magazines. You can see the Metal Gear Solid artwork here. Like I said, it was done in-house by whatever illustrator at EGM, and it almost looks official. Like, it looks that good. But you can see some of the other games in here. Obviously, Metal Gear Solid was a huge deal when it came out, but there's also Pocket Fighter, Jet Force Gemini, Wipeout 64, Madden 99, ISS Pro 98, Parasite Eve, Medieval, and Wild 9. And I probably bought this one back in the day because I was obsessed with the Game Boy camera, and there was Game Boy camera coverage in this issue. So we'll flip to the first page, and you can see this crazy ad for Tomba, which I know is a classic today, but it wasn't really respected at the time when it came out. It has that awesome claymation art style that I always appreciated. It's kind of crazy that you basically have a page and a half of artwork and then just a handful of screenshots that don't look great. It really didn't do the game justice because, like I said, this one is kind of a cult classic. And then flipping right along, we have an ad for Bomberman Hero, and the ad itself mostly is 1 3/4 pages, and there's only 3 screenshots of the game, which I found kind of interesting. Like, you're trying to sell the game, obviously you caught my attention, but these screenshots don't really do the game justice. And then flipping through right here, we are at the masthead of the magazine, which is the list of all the editors and all the creatives who contributed to this issue. And there's a little article, I guess, by John Davison. It's a variation of the cover art there. I assume that's his face or whoever's face is writing in there. Pretty standard stuff. And then we have an ad for, I guess this is Turok 2, judging by the Acclaim and the N64 logos here. October 98 and Second Coming. Really not much going on here, so it's kind of an elusive ad, which definitely caught my attention. Here we have an ad for Fighting Force 64. And here you have like a jacked dude with a tire over his head. I guess it's going with the beat 'em up brawl nature of the game. There's a random spark plug and a screw. There's only 4 screenshots of the game. I guess it shows a decent variety of the gameplay, but they're pretty blurry. It's kind of par for the course for the time. These screenshots don't really do the game any justice. I'm really relying on the ad here to catch my attention, especially as a stupid kid in 1998. I believe Fighting Force 64 has some sort of connection with Sega's Streets of Rage series. I'm not sure if this is like a spiritual successor or a scrapped game in the series where they kind of recycled ideas. For sure, if you know anything about this game or the Streets of Rage connection or whatever game it is connected to, please be sure to let me know in the comments. And then here we have an ad for The Fifth Element. I've never played this one. I was a big fan of the movie when I was a kid, which I'm surprised this one kind of went under my radar. You have a 3D model of Lilu, I believe was her name in the movie, and then a couple of screenshots. You got Bruce Willis there, and you got Lilu beating up some weird alien thing. So just 3 screenshots, and then just the game's cover. So not a lot going on here to evaluate whether their game is good or not. I guess if you're into late 90s 3D models of Lilu, this is the game for you. And here we have a little table of contents. So there's the Metal Gear Solid. You got a picture of the Game Boy Color up in the top right hand corner here. Screenshot from Banjo-Kazooie. Some N64, PlayStation 1. Saturn was pretty much dead by September of 1998, but I guess there were still some new games coming out. And even in the blurb right here, you can kind of see, what's this, a Saturn preview? Yes, we're happy too. So even the EGM people were surprised. There's a little game directory and quite a few games that they're covering here. Definitely a good variety. And then here's a little preview for a Designing Women article, which was kind of a big deal in the 90s. I mean, sexism's pretty rampant still in gaming, but especially in the 90s, women in gaming were kind of unheard of. So this is probably a pretty interesting article to read as an adult. And of course, there's like a bootleg looking N64 controller. Here we have an ad for RC Racer, another PlayStation game. I've never heard of this one either. It looks like a decent little racing game. You got 4 little tiny screenshots, just like the rest of the ads here. Made by Gremlin and Fox Interactive. Yeah, I really don't remember this one. Judging by who made it or published it, and the fact that I've never heard of it means it's probably not a valuable game, but I would love to check it out. It's available on Windows 95 CD-ROM and the PlayStation game console. And then here we have an ad for Duke Nukem Time to Kill, and then we have a grand total of 6 screenshots. You have that classic Duke Nukem artwork with his little snarl, a weird alien guy with a 6-shooter, and the screenshots definitely show a good variety variety of gameplay. There's like a water level, 2-player mode split screen. It's made by 3D Realms, which I believe was involved with the first Duke Nukem game. I could be wrong about that. I don't know, kind of a cool ad though. It totally has that 90s attitude throughout, so I gotta give it that. Here's pretty standard 90s game fare. We have letters to the editor. I'm not going to read all through these, but it's funny just seeing AOL.com. Granted, that was like super popular back then, but nobody uses it now. Here's an @nettins.net. I've never heard of that one. And here we have an ad for Levi's jeans. So if you like your jeans super rigid and stiff, you can go for the Levi's rigor mortis jeans. What a dumb ad. I love it. Here's more letters. They're pretty interesting to read through. Like I said, I'm not going to go through it now. They're total throwbacks and just good time capsules to see what was going on with gaming at the time. Granted, there was the internet, as was pretty evident by all these email submissions, but I remember even by the late 90s, zines were pretty big still, so this is really where a lot of people got their information. And then next up, we have an ad for Tales of Destiny on the PlayStation, and as evident by the text, it is an RPG. 3 little screenshots down there. It looks like pretty standard fare. You got an anime looking dude with a sword. It's made by Namco. This is probably one of those PS1 games that's worth nothing, or it's worth like a ton of money because it's some weird obscure RPG. Here we have more letters. So I remember Sushi X being like kind of an important figure in EGM. That's really one of the only names I do remember, so it's kind of cool still seeing that there. And then I always like the artwork submissions for all these magazines. I mean, all these people are super talented. They have like a Street Fighter 2, Speed Racer, and then Gran Turismo artwork, which is kind of cool. And then an ad for ebworld.com/EGM. Definitely like a 90s extreme ad here. So you got a middle-aged dude with a mustache getting an I Love EB World tattoo to cover up his I Love Mom tattoo. We have a War Games ad. Again, another PlayStation ad. This whole issue seems to be packed with PlayStation ads. This is another one I've never heard of. I was into PlayStation back then, but I wasn't really playing a lot of these random games. I was playing a lot of Twisted Metal, Parappa the Rapper, Gran Turismo, Crash Bandicoot, kind of stuff like that. I wasn't really into games like, although I did like Nuclear Strike and Soviet Strike, which seems kind of similar to this, even though this is a tank game. It's kind of just in that war game genre. So here we're at the press start section, which is kind of a catch-all for all gaming news that was going on at the time. A couple of screenshots for some games here. You can see you have a, looks like a Mortal Kombat game or something like that. Duke Nukem, Grand Theft Auto, and then here we go, Resident Evil 2 down here. Thrill Kill. I could be wrong, but I think this was like in a mature game that was stirring up a bit of controversy at the time. We have some coverage from E3 here, and then here we go. I just talked about video game violence. I guess this is focusing a little bit on it, and it seems that the consensus, at least in their poll here, is that parents should decide what is appropriate. Take that for what it is. Here we have a little bit of coverage, what looks like to be a Tomb Raider movie in theaters everywhere in 1999. I've never seen the Tomb Raider movies, but I think the first one came out in like the early 2000s. I could be wrong. We have an ad for Dead Ball Zone. Again, another PlayStation game. This one's definitely giving out Mutant League football vibes, which is kind of a good thing. You have a dude with a chainsaw. Obviously, this guy just threw the ball right through this guy, and he's still alive. It looks like a fun little game. 4 screenshots. They all look pretty similar with like that floor graphics and texture. Maybe there's not a ton of variety, but maybe the gameplay speaks for itself. I really don't know. And of course, a game where you can kick somebody in the balls, like who doesn't want to play that? And then here's a Tomb Raider 3 ad. Not a whole lot going on here. There's literally 0 screenshots. You just have like a zoomed in picture of Lara Croft's face. The Tomb Raider games never really appealed to me with those weird tank controls, but maybe I'll give this one a shot since I have it. And then moving along, we have some more news articles here. There's something with Nolan Bushnell of Atari. Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Oh, pretty cool. House of the Dead coverage, soon to be turned into a movie. I think they did make a House of the Dead movie, but it wasn't anywhere near the late 90s. Here's some Game Boy Color coverage. You have Gex jumps onto Color Game Boy. Some Sega Dreamcast coverage. There's a Hello Kitty that has a striking resemblance to the Pocket Pikachu, and it talks a little bit about it here. Nintendo is introducing a follow-up starring one of Japan's most recognizable characters. So this is pretty cool. I literally had no idea about this. So Nintendo actually released this as a follow-up. I totally like weird, obscure Nintendo stuff, so I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for one of those. That's awesome. So here's a coverage of the N64 DD and a non-flattering picture of Shigeru Miyamoto. Here we have a PS1 dev unit. Here's a little bit of coverage about the All Nippon Airways Pokemon promotion that was pretty popular back then. I was always fascinated with seeing these planes with like Pokemon graphics on them. I thought it was pretty cool. Here's an ad for Pocket Fighter. It looks like they're just super deformed, cutesy Street Fighter characters. It's probably a decent game if it plays like others in the series. Here we have a top 20 section. I was always kind of fascinated with these ones. So we have Tekken 3 at the top, Gran Turismo on Sega Saturn, which I didn't even know was a thing. Yeah, that has to be a typo. I mean, it's a PlayStation game, so that's pretty funny. 1080 snowboarding, GoldenEye 007 holding strong at number 6. I'm surprised Super Mario 64 was still in the top 20 by almost the end of 98. That's kind of crazy. Twisted Metal down at number 20. Here's some reviews here for the games. I always liked how they rated their games. They gave you 4 ratings from 4 different people, and it was kind of just like a quick, easy way to evaluate it. Here's a list of most wanted video games, and number 1 by a long shot is Ocarina of Time, Metal Gear Solid, which people were still really stoked for back then, and then all the way at the bottom, number 7 is Perfect Dark. Here's an ad for Thunder Force 5 on the PlayStation. I'm not super familiar with the Thunder Force series, but I enjoy the second one on the Genesis, and this one looks to be more of the same, just with upgraded graphics. It's still made by Working Design, so that's a good sign. And here's, I guess it was a contest, Win 10,000, and look at these throwback companies. I don't know Gamers Republic, but you have Babbage's and Software, etc. And then here we have some top editors picks, top 10 in Japan and the arcade. You can kind of see Sega Saturn's holding strong a little bit here and there, but PlayStation was dominating back then, and then you have one Game Boy game. And I'm not familiar with this one, GB Let's Go and Go All-Star Battle Max. So I'll be sure to check that one out and see if maybe I can import it if it looks decent. Another ad for Working Designs here. It is for Elemental Gearbolt. Never heard of this one. It has some pretty pixelated screenshots here, but I do have to give it credit that they're not just squares and they're kind of like integrated into the artwork. It actually looks kind of cool. And it looks to be another shooter. I'm not too sure. So yeah, it is a shooter for use with the Namco Gun Con, which I do have, so maybe I'll give this one a shot. Maybe I'll see if I can pick it up if it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, which it probably does. We have like a spoof ad. It's kind of like a National Enquirer spoof for Spyro the Dragon. This one's kind of cool, actually. Spyro and Lara Croft, Hollywood's new couple. Kind of funny. This one's a pretty cool ad, though. Totally late 90s. But again, I mean, it really did catch my attention. So here's an ad for Vigilante 8 on the PlayStation. I believe this was also on the N64 and the Dreamcast. Never played this one myself, which is kind of a surprise to me because, like I said before, I love Twisted Metal, and this looks like more of the same. And there's 3 screenshots below there. They look pretty good. It looks like a Twisted Metal car battling kind of game. So it looks like I have a laundry list of games that A, I haven't played, and B, I need to check out more so far. So moving on to the N64 coverage, we have Wipeout 64. I think it originated on the PlayStation, but it did make its way over to the 64. It's a pretty fun game. If you're into that whole futuristic racing thing, you really can't go wrong with this one. And then here's an ad for Devil Dice, another PlayStation ad. It kind of looks like Intelligent Cube. I've heard of this one before, probably from this magazine. I'm assuming this one didn't sell too well in the States, just judging by like that weird character artwork and the monotonous visuals, but who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Here's a preview for Madden 99. I'm not a fan of the Madden games, never really was, so this really doesn't do too much for me. So this is kind of cool. There's an ad here. I don't know what it is for yet, but I guess it's leading you into the ad onto the next page. So you have like a bad guy here, a dog, and some kid with a gun. Heart of Darkness. I have never even heard of this one, but the visuals look pretty legit. Looks like a good variety of levels here. It looks kind of cool. Definitely super colorful, as the game's ad is stating here. Let's add it to my list of games I should check out. Here's a preview for GT64. Could it be a good racer for the N64? N64 is kind of like the racer console. I think there's a fair amount of good racers on there, but maybe this one's pretty decent. Some Bomberman Hero coverage, Deadly Arts, F1 World Grand Prix, which I believe, yeah, it was published by Nintendo. And this one as well. Here's an ad for Iggy's Wrecking Balls for the N64. Another one that I do have. I actually got it complete in box at a garage sale. I forgot how much I paid for it. It was like a stack of N64 games boxed for like $30 or $40. So that was an awesome find. I'm not a fan of the character design at all, but it is a pretty fun game. So going back, here's an ad for Iggy's Wrecking Balls, and then another ad for the same game. Some more previews here. Winback, Jet Force Gemini, which is an awesome one by Rare. NFL Blitz. I didn't realize it was also on Windows 95. That's kind of interesting. But this game is super fun. I have it on the N64 and I love it. Looks like Parasite Eve up here, which I know people love. Circuit Breakers, another PlayStation game I've never heard of. Kind of reminds me of Penny Racers on N64, or like a more modern version of Micro Machines on NES. And here we have an ad for Parasite Eve. I know this one is like a PlayStation cult classic. Here's a preview for Wild 9. I've always heard good things about this one as well. And then a weird ad for Command & Conquer Red Alert Retaliation. I have the first Command & Conquer on N64, and I always had a good time with it back in the day, but this is just like a weird ad. A couple of small screenshots down in the bottom left-hand corner to sell you on the gameplay. I assume it plays pretty similar to the first game, but I have no idea. NFL Game Day 99. Here's an ad for ODT on the PlayStation. Just a super polygonal model, I assume, of a guy that's in the game. It definitely caught my attention a little bit. It has some of that like 90s extreme marketing. So again, another game I need to check out. Here's an ad for Jersey Devil. I guess he just stripped a bike. It's definitely within the heyday of all that 90s extreme marketing. It looks pretty standard fare for all of like those 3D mascot driven games of the time, and I believe since he was a PlayStation exclusive for a little bit of time, he was kind of like a third or fourth tier mascot for the PlayStation. Duke Nukem Time to Kill. I talked about this one before. There was an ad for it at the beginning of the issue. Here's a pretty cool ad for Alien Resurrection, the game. It's just an ultrasound with a little xenomorph in there. Pretty cool. Some more PlayStation previews there. Medieval, which is a super hard but awesome game. Here we go. Here is classic 90s extreme marketing. You have a kid here wearing an Ubisoft shirt, which nobody has ever worn in the entire existence of man. He has some sweet hairdo a la Turbo. These like cheesy late 90s Oakley A-frame ripoffs. He's got his little bracelet right there. Probably some sort of oversized shorts. I mean, this dude's drip is just unmatched. I love it. And oh yeah, there's a game being advertised there for a game named Scars. Never heard of it. Looks like some sort of like vehicular combat / racing game. And I'm going to check out this game particularly just because of the kid in the ad. More PlayStation previews. There is a page that's ripped out here. I don't remember what was here. The bottom corner says Colony Wars. Who knows? Some more PlayStation previews. You have Fifth Element, which was advertised earlier in the issue. This one seems like another obscure one here. It's made by Tecmo, the sequel to Tecmo's award-winning 3D trap battle game. I've never heard of this one. Some more PlayStation previews. It was kind of crazy how many PlayStation games were coming out back then. There were so many. An ad for a soccer game. I remember Tenshu. I remember like seeing this ad specifically. I believe this is the cover of the game here. I think it just says like Tenshu up there or somewhere around there. I remember this one being pushed a lot back then. It definitely has like Ninja Gaiden vibes before the reboot in the early 2000s. Some more PlayStation previews. You have Vermin here, which kind of looks like Lemmings or something like that. And then Dead in the Water, which is one I haven't heard of, but it looks awesome. It's just like vehicular combat, but in the water. That is definitely one I'm going to check out. And then we have an ad for an Atlas game here. So Atlas games by nature are pretty limited in release and are generally sought after. This is a PlayStation game. You have some pixelated looking anime characters down here. 4 screenshots. Features 2-player action. So this is another one I need to check out. NASCAR 99. Test Drive Off-Road 2, which I believe I have the original on PlayStation, and I always had a good time with it. And then these weird racing controllers. I remember seeing these everywhere, especially the N64 variant. It was like a weird controller I think you hold with one hand, and then the top part here you kind of twist back and forth to turn. I assume it's like an analog wheel, so maybe it responds pretty well. I have no idea. Interact made like decent third-party products back then, and I had no idea that there was a PC variant, so that's kind of cool to see. And out of all these, I actually think it looks the coolest with that red and black and gray aesthetic. Kind of looks like it would be at home on like an Atari Jaguar. So here's an ad for Eidos games here. Tomb Raider 3, Ninja, Omicron, and Fighting Force 64. Some more PlayStation previews. So here's an ad for WCW NWO Revenge on the N64. I know the N64 had a handful of wrestling games that were super respected, so maybe this is one of them. I have no idea. More PlayStation previews. We have Devil Dice and ODT. We saw the ad before for Devil Dice, and here we have an ad for a gaming chair. It looks like the Intensor. This looks like a pretty crazy piece of technology. Look at all this. So it looks like it hooks up to a subwoofer. It has like a tweeter, a headphone jack. So I guess it's really touting that you'll feel the game and it reacts to your movements. I have never heard of this thing. I wonder if it was actually released. Some more PlayStation previews. I remember Bust a Groove, and even in this issue they say it's a per app replica clone of sorts, but I remember it being pretty fun. Here we have an ad for some Kemco games, but Kemco is definitely one of those throwback companies. Here's some more PlayStation previews. I was always kind of into those rhythm games like Parappa and Buster Groove, like I was just saying. This is kind of crazy. There's an advertisement in EGM for the official PlayStation magazine. This whole issue is just stacked with PlayStation. It's kind of crazy. But I always liked it back then that these included the demo discs. I played so many of these back in the day. Here's a multi-page ad for a Wild 9 for the PlayStation. This one definitely looks like it has some cool artwork here. It's made by Shiny Entertainment, which is responsible for Earthworm Jim, so that's a good sign already. You can kind of see there's only 4 small screenshots. It looks to be like a 2 or 2.5D game, but the colors and graphics seem to be like vivid and beautiful. It definitely features some of like that wacky character design like in Earthworm Jim. Finally, we have a Saturn preview. So it looks like it's only in Japan, and Dracula X, which I believe is also on the PlayStation. This is probably one of those Saturn games. Even though it is a Japanese import, it's probably a ton of money. Pretty cool though. I didn't even know Dracula X came out on the Saturn. Here we have an ad for an Atlas game, and it is an RPG sim. This one looks to be kind of cool. It appears to be like sprite-based artwork. Looks like there's some 3D cutscenes in it, some arcade previews. Daytona 2, which I'm a huge fan of. That game rules. Brunswick Circuit Pro Bowling. Looks to be your run-of-the-mill bowling game. Also on Windows 95. Mega Man Legends. This one's a decent game. I have it on the PlayStation. I think it's the Greatest Hits edition. I need to give it another shot. I remember when it came out, it was such a departure from like the traditional Mega Man games. I really didn't give it a chance. So moving right along here, we are at the coming soon section, and I thought this was kind of funny. There's like a ton of PlayStation games, a good amount of 64, a handful of Game Boy, and then one lone Sega Saturn game. We have Magic Knight Ray Earth, which I know is pretty sought after today. And then the next page we have a warning for Thrill Kill. This is like typical 90s extreme marketing. I guess it's like a waiver or a warning for this game here. And you turn the page, and then here is Thrill Kill. It actually features the actual in-game characters, which is pretty cool. For some reason I remember this one being pretty notorious for being bad and being violent, but I could be totally misremembering this one. And finally, we're at the main event of this issue. We have the Metal Gear spread here. It features a good amount of screenshots on the right side of the page here. You can see that the text is in Japanese. And this game was such a big deal when it came out. I remember Pizza Hut actually had a promo where if you ordered like a large pizza or something, you got the demo disc for this game, which I did, and I played the hell out of it. And then the spread is broken up by an ad here. We have an ad for Earthworm Jim 3D. I know it has a reputation for being pretty bad. And looking at the 3 screenshots here, it looks like a typical 3D platformer of the time. So I guess that's proof enough that you can't judge these ads by the screenshots. It's available on PlayStation, N64, and Windows 95. And then jumping back into that Metal Gear spread, we have most of the main characters of the game, and I'm pretty sure these are the official character models. It's pretty cool seeing them here. I found this kind of interesting. You have Snake's life timeline here. It starts at 1970, and they were pretty forward thinking. They went all the way to 2000 and 2010, which in 1998 seems pretty futuristic, even though it was a while ago now. And then next up, we have an ad for Aero Gauge by ASCII. I have this one on the N64. It's your typical futuristic racing game, but it is a good time. There's a good amount of variety, and it's enough for a few hours of fun. Here's some more Metal Gear coverage, more screenshots. That artwork is just so legit. A lot of these ads here were plastered throughout a lot of video game magazines. This is just for some random video game store, Chips and Bits. Again, a lot of PlayStation games, a handful of Saturn, 64. It's pretty cool actually. They have some board games and role-playing games. And I guess these are the featured games on the right side of the page here. I like how Ocarina of Time has like a placeholder artwork here. Same with Metal Gear Solid. That is not the official cover art. And then flipping through, we have a 2-page ad for Turbo Prop Racing on the PlayStation. I've never heard of this one. It kind of reminds me of like Hydro Thunder. And of course, there's an extreme 90s ad to catch your attention. I guess these boats blew past this lifeguard and these 2 ladies so quickly that their clothes came off. I might take a closer look at this one though, because I do like boat racing games. Wave Race 64 is one of my favorite games of all time. And going back into that Metal Gear spread, I always liked this tidbit down here, because up until this issue came out, I had no idea that there were 2 Metal Gear games on the MSX. I always thought the 2 NES games were the first ones. So that was a pretty cool history lesson. And as we flip the page, we're greeted to an ad, a 2-page ad for Ninja Shadow of Darkness on the PlayStation. I've never heard of this one either, but it has screenshots on the right side of the page, and they actually look kind of cool. It's like a 3D ninja adventure looking kind of game. It's definitely giving off like Ninja Gaiden vibes before the reboot, which seems seems like a good thing. I might give this one a shot if I can get it for a decent price. And then nestled toward the back of the issue, we finally get to that Women in Gaming article. I am going to put a bookmark on this one and read it at a later time because, like I said before, I think it would be pretty interesting to read with an adult mindset. And it seems pretty extensive. There's an NFL quarterback club ad plastered right in the middle of it, a game I do not care about. It's pretty cool to see stuff like that, especially back in the late 90s. And then here's an ad for N64, and I guess I cut out something on the back half of the page. Yeah, look at that. I guess I cut out a Game Boy. I have no idea what I did with it. This looks like a pretty cool tutorial on how to get the best out of your Game Boy camera, because if you were around at the time, it didn't have the highest quality pictures. Even for the Game Boy, it was a little rough. From what I see in these screenshots, it seems like they're maximizing its potential though. I'll definitely check that one out. So another ad for Eidos and Core. They're coming to a whole new platform, and it looks like chalk outlines. All right, so this one isn't super straightforward. I see it over here, Fighting Force 64. So this one's a little bit of a cryptic ad. Totally 90s extreme. And this is what I remember a lot of EGM back in the day, the review crew. It was kind of like those rapid fire reviews with just 4 rating scores. You can kind of skim over really quickly and just deduce whether the game is good or not. So as you can see, Banjo-Kazooie pretty much has glowing reviews all around. I can't say the same for Flying Dragon, and Iggy's Wrecking Balls seems like middle of the road to okay reviews. Some of these ones I don't really care too much about. The Contra Adventure, which I did pick up a few years ago at a garage sale complete. I didn't even bother to test it out. I'll admit it was kind of a shelf collector move, but judging by these scores, it's not really enticing me to try it out. And then I should point this out too. So back in the day, if you bought a magazine at a newsstand or whatever, if you weren't subscribed to it, you'd have these order forms in there to kind of entice you to subscribe. And subscribing usually came at a substantial savings versus just buying each one separately. So yeah, there were a lot of reviews back in here. There's that Turbo Prop Racing game. It got like okay reviews, it seems. And all the way in the back, we have one Saturn game, Shining Force 3, which I know is another classic that people love, and it seemed to have gotten glowing reviews. Pretty cool to see Saturn love in this issue, even though it's kind of minimal at this point. Here's an ad for some other magazines, Summer Gaming, PlayStation, and video games for the Nintendo 64. And you can kind of see some of these throwback stores down here. You have Software Etc., Babbage's, Kmart, Electronics Boutique, Walden Books, Borders, Crown Book, and Barnes & Noble, which is still around. Here's kind of like a tips and tricks tutorial section of Vigilante 8. Now, I always liked seeing stuff like this in video game magazines where it would physically map out like item locations and things like that. It was kind of hard to come across stuff like this on the internet, so a magazine would definitely be your best option back then. Here are more concise tips and tricks. We have X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Hot Shots Golf, Panzer Dragoon Saga, another Saturn game. I'm seriously impressed. Jersey Devil. We have a little ad for a contest down here for a grand prize of $10,000. A single page ad for videogames.com, and I guess these are all of the magazines that are under its ownership, and you can see EGM and the official PlayStation magazine are all under one company, which is pretty interesting. And then here's like a little gear and gadgets section, and this one actually looks pretty cool. It's an early capture card made by iOmega, who also made the zip drive for the computers back in the day. It was priced pretty aggressively at $200. Granted, that was a lot of money, especially back then with inflation, but to have a capture card with composite inputs seems like mind-blowing back then, even for the late 90s. That's kind of crazy. And then here's an ad for a preview hotline with tips and tricks. And look at some of these prizes. You can even win a Gamecom, which I'm sure by late 1998, not too many people cared about. And then here's a little write-up on the Dreamcast, and you can see that the controller is pretty much the finalized controller, but it's missing the official Dreamcast logo on there. And then you can see here that the writers wish it had at least 2 more buttons, which I guess that's kind of a fair critique on the controller. Another Associated Magazine ad here. We have Expert Gamer, which is formerly EGM Squared or EGM2. A little preview of next month's games. You have Twisted Metal 3, Star Wars Rogue Squadron. There's definitely some heavy hitters on here, so that issue would be pretty interesting to see. I don't think I have that one, but maybe I'll check out a PDF of it online. And now we have an ad for Gex Enter the Gecko on PlayStation. Typical 90s extreme marketing at play here. We have Bart plus 007 minus the cheesiness of Kermit. Gives you the ultra cool Gex, who's also rocking those official lame late 90s Oakley sunglasses. That's hilarious. And then here's some ads for more video game shops. We have Japan Video Games, so I guess this is probably a good source to import Japanese games back then. And BRE Software. It seems like they're primarily focused on PlayStation and N64 at that point. Here's another store, Tomo. It looks like it's more Japanese import games. Here's an index of all the advertisers and their websites. Here we go. This is what I'm talking about. We have a Funcoland Superstore advertisement. It's a pretty tiny ad here, but this really hits home because I was obsessed with Funcoland back in the day. They were still pushing NES games at the time. Bubble Bobble for $15. That's really not a bad deal, especially back then. We'll move down to the the SNES. Aerobiz for $25. I mean, that's a steal. TMNT4 for $11. And we'll check out some of the Game Boy games too, because they were a little bit older at the time. Alleyway for $13. I mean, that seems crazy. And Metroid 2 for $15. That's a pretty good deal. It's awesome seeing stuff like that. I really miss Funcoland. I've made 2 other Funcoland videos going through their old guides that they used to give out back in the day. I'll throw a link to those in the description if you want to check those out. Here's another store, Game Express. It looks like they sell games and collectibles. They have like Sailor Moon and Final Fantasy here. And then we have an ad for Rocket Game Products. It looks like it's all third-party peripherals and like cheat devices and things like that. They even have the GB Booster. This allows you to play Game Boy games on the N64 since there was no official way to do so. I haven't heard really good things about this. I don't think it works well with the majority of the games. It was kind of cool seeing third-party companies try to come up with a solution for it. Unfortunately, this one didn't really work out though. And then we have the Interactor Vest for $30. I remember that being a pretty big piece of crap back then. And then the last page of the issue here, we have an ad for Game Shark. We have a cop here with powdered sugar all over his uniform and face, and I guess you're just blasting past him with some inconceivable velocity with your Game Shark. I'm not going to rag on Game Shark because I actually did love it. I have it for 64 and I still use it from time to time. It's a great product. Here's the back cover. We have a Sega Saturn ad here, and a kind of weird one at that. It's for the character Edge. I guess you can cut out his face and wear it as a mask if you're so inclined. You can even go to Sega.com to download other character masks, which is pretty funny. Maybe I'll go back on the Wayback Machine and see if I can actually find some of these. So that was Electronic Gaming Monthly, September 1998. I hope you all enjoyed this little trip down memory lane, and if you did, please be sure to let me know in the comments. I love to hear from you guys. And as always, thank you so much for checking out Retro Game Addict. I really do appreciate you all. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you on the next one.